In the world today, most people want what is called the American dream. They want love, a family, a fancy car, and a nice home in a nice neighborhood. They also want a good job and money to travel to interesting places. Life is great because they have the American dream. But what happens to this dream if they hear they have a devastating illness like lung cancer? The doctor may tell them they need treatment immediately or they will be dead in 6 months. He tells them you need surgery and then you need chemotherapy to get better. When they get home, they think of many unanswered questions. They ask themselves, will I survive when so many of my friends with cancer have died? How will I deal with the pain, hair loss, nausea and vomiting, sore mouth and other side effects of chemotherapy and pain of surgery? Will I be able to keep on working? What will happen to my family? Then they look at the internet and wonder, is there a better way to deal with lung cancer and return to my American dream? Carl Helvey can tell you yes, there is a better way. Carl Helvey is a registered nurse with a doctorate in public health and a 38-year lung cancer survivor. Carl was given 6 months to live when diagnosed, and he refused chemotherapy and surgery. Carl used alternative interventions. Those not only helped him overcome lung cancer, but also to remain cancer-free and healthy for over the past 36 years since recovery. In his book, You Can Beat Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions, Dr. Helvey will tell you his story of using all-natural treatments for lung cancer and continuing to work during his treatment. Free of pain and discomfort, Carl will also share how he remained cancer and disease-free since then without chronic illnesses or prescribed medications. His story is supplemented with chapters by Dr. Bernie Siegel, Dr. Francesco Contreras, and Dr. James Forsyth, alternative integrative physicians, and Dr. Kim Dalzell and Tanya Harder-Pierce, health professionals. All have successfully helped others overcome cancer. Research presented by the alternative physicians on their treatments for lung cancer demonstrate a significantly higher long-term survival rate for lung cancer clients than those obtained by conventional doctors. In addition, their clients were free of or had reduced side effects. You Can Beat Lung Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions by Dr. Carl Helvey is now available at all major book outlets and at www.beatlungcancer.net. That's www.beatlungcancer.net. This information may help you return to the American dream. What if someone told you you could live to be 120? Would you believe him? What if he told you the Bible guaranteed it? All you needed to do was follow his rules and buy his products. Would you do it? What if you invested 20 years of your life in him? What if he tested his substances on your child? What if your child became brain damaged as a result? Meet Dr. Tyler Belknap, a fast-talking Texas admin turned health guru. At the helm of a vast health food and supplement empire, he has established himself as the authority on nutrition and longevity. But what his followers don't know is that his products are laced with bizarre psychoactive substances from genetically modified plants developed in his very own secret lab. No wonder his customers can't stop using them. Tyler Belknap will stop at nothing to keep his edge in the market, even if it means experimenting on children. Chasing 120, a story of food, faith, fraud, and the pursuit of longevity, a novel from the pen of political cartoonist Monty Wolverton, is an easy and entertaining read full of rich characters and intrigue. It hits home in a world filled with all kind of hucksterism and offers a glimpse of what can happen when GMO technology falls into the wrong hands. Chasing 120 by Monty Wolverton. Get your copy today at www.ptm.org/120 or on Amazon.com.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. Worldwide, toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV, and our main website at www.xzoneradiotv.com. Don't forget, X Zone Nation, you can always listen to the one and only Ed Till Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. right here on the Starcom Radio Network. My guest this hour is our good friend Howard Bloom. He's the author of the Mohammed Code. I'm telling you, it's the Rosetta Stone of the century. All you have to do to find out more about the Rosetta Stone, yeah, right, the Mohammed Code, is go to Amazon.com or visit Howard's website at www.howardbloom.net. And Howard Bloom, how the heck are you, my good friend? How are things in the Great Big Apple?
They've been absolutely gorgeous. They've been absolutely stunning. The weather has been fantastic. This is the greenest summer I've ever seen in my life. But when it comes to global affairs, it's a very perplexing picture.
Wow, I have to ask you. You know, with all the different presidential candidates that the American population will have the pleasure of picking from, how would you best describe what's happening these days in presidential elections?
It's a parade of cliches, and that's really unfortunate. We see almost no genuine, authentic candidates. Bernie Sanders over on the left is an authentic candidate. You know that he's saying what he believes. Hillary Clinton is a pastiche. Scott Walker is a collage. He changes his policies to fit the drift of the wind. He had a staffer in Iowa who had said something that was construed by the Iowa right-wingers as negative, and when they complained about it, he fired her. He changes his approach depending on what he thinks is going to gain him support. Marco Rubio over on the right has also got a certain degree of authenticity. When you hear his voice, you understand that he's saying something that he actually believes in. Mm-hmm. So this is a battle between authenticity and inauthenticity. I mean, it's one thing for a company like the Kellogg's company to try to put together a cereal, a new breakfast, based on testing groups, on panels, on statistics, on marketing figures. But leadership is human.
Yeah.
And the most essential thing that a human who wants to be a leader can bring is his deep belief in certain goals and his ability to comprehend a wide variety of issues and put them into their perspective of how you achieve those goals. And there are only two candidates who seem to have that sort of, grounding, reality, honesty in this campaign. And if Bernie Sanders' arithmetic is correct, there are 20 people in this campaign so far.
Wow. Let me ask you, Donald Trump, you're a New Yorker. You're also a very honest person. What do you think about Donald Trump's...
He nauseates me. He's nauseated me for a very long time. To have a TV show that is allegedly about how you run a company and how you run it successfully, that's entirely based on the premise that you can be unspeakably cruel to people, that the highlight of what you do is firing people. You're fired, is nauseating. I've run 2 companies. I started them from scratch. They've both been successful companies. You do not run a company that way. You tear apart a company that way. So Donald Trump has been giving the wrong message to America for at least 7 or 8 years. Meanwhile, his message about Mexican immigrants all being rapists was nauseating. But because, look, when you're a leader, there's a cheap way to get an audience, and there's an expensive way to get an audience. The expensive way to get an audience is to uplift people, to give them a vision they've never had before, to show them how they can proceed toward that vision through their individual actions and through the collective actions of the group. That's hard. The easy way is to spot an enemy, and no matter how undeserving that enemy is of your animosity, and then to focus all hatred upon that enemy as if eliminating that enemy will solve all of the problems of society. Adolf Hitler did that. Donald Trump is doing that, and it works. It's called demagoguery, and it's made Donald Trump the most visible Republican candidate right now in America, which is appalling.
How do we explain his poll success? You know, what is he, second in the polls?
Something like that. He is a billionaire, and people admire that, much as people really resent the billionaire class. They admire it. He makes sure that his every appearance, like his appearance to announce his presidential candidate, he was coming down a stairway with a beautiful and highly buxom young woman in front of him. It was a symbol of what he stands for. He stands for having so much money you can get any girl you want. And it's very hard for American males to resist that message, and it's very hard to resist the message that we can solve all our problems simply by hating somebody.
Are Americans that shallow where they're really buying that?
All humans are that shallow. Fidel Castro maintained his dominance over Cuban society for 50 years by having an enemy, the United States. He could blame absolutely everything on the enemy. There could be a lack of variety of foods at the stores. You could have cars left over from the 1950s when Cuba still did business with America, buildings that were falling apart. But if you could point to America and give people a reason to hate that enemy, you could hold them. And so, yes, we're all that shallow. Animals are like that. You take mice, are very huggy, friendly beasts. They're constantly hugging the other members of their family. If you take a mouse that's grown up in a family and always been hugged all of its life, you take it out of the group, you rub it in the shavings from another group so it smells like a foreigner. When you reintroduce that mouse to his family, the family can see him clearly. They've known him all their lives. They've hugged him all their lives, but he smells different. You know what they do to him?
Attack
him. They tear him apart. Yeah. So these deep impulses to solve problems by hating somebody, by picking on a scapegoat, go way, way back in our animal past. And, of course, they underlie our politics, too. And our goal is to get away from them by looking at something higher and achieving something higher. When John F. Kennedy had his moon moment 20 months into his administration and pointed us to a goal that seemed impossible and said that we were going to try to achieve it not because it was easy, but because it was hard.
Right.
His goal of the moon. He lifted our spirit for the next 50 years.
He pulled the nation together.
What's that?
He pulled the nation together.
Yes, he pulled the nation together around a positive thing.
Right.
Not around a hatred. And the result is he up.
Well, I think we're losing Howard.
For 50 years. 50
Howard, we're having audio problems with you, my friend. Can you hear me?
Well, when people want to achieve something remarkable, they said, let's get an Apollo program. Oh, we're having audio problems. Yeah, I can hear you. You want to call back in?
No. It seems to be okay now. If you have your camera on, Howard, can you close it because the cameras eat bandwidth?
I've got it. It's closed.
Okay, great.
We're trying to make maximum use of our bandwidth here. And we do have an echo on this side of the phone, but I'm accustomed to speaking whether there are echoes or not. So at any rate, but what Kennedy did was absolutely remarkable, and we need it done again. We need to point ourselves at another impossible goal and we need to steel ourselves and gather our resources to reach it, because it lifts our sense of ourselves and our possibilities when we achieve the impossible. It gives us a whole different perspective on what is possible and what is not. And we need that sense that the impossible is possible in order to proceed into the future as a society. And no presidential candidate is giving us that. Not a single one. Not even Bernie Sanders. Not even Cruz. Not Cruz. I'm sorry. The guy from Florida.
Jeb Bush?
No. The other guy from Florida.
Rubio?
The younger one.
Oh, jeez. You've got me.
Okay. His name is escaping me. For Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
It's such a confused. It's so many candidates.
I know.
In the race. Remember.
How are you supposed to keep track of what everybody's doing and what everybody's saying? It's wow.
Not easy. I read Scott Walker's entire speech, and there are chilling things in there. He's bragging about having destroyed unions in Wisconsin. Well, wages for American workers, depending on whose statistics you're using, have been going down since the 1980s or the 1990s. They've been going down. The number of jobs people are working are 2 or 3 in some cases just to get by. The ladder of opportunity talks about opening America as a society of opportunity. It's open to all. But if you keep lowering people's wages and they can't climb and they have to carry more jobs than they can possibly handle to have a family, how are they supposed to have family values if they never see their kids? And he wants more of this decreasing. He wants more of decreasing pay, and he wants more of increasing hours. He's trying to pass a law in Wisconsin that makes it possible for a business to work a worker 7 days a week without respite ever. There's a current law in Wisconsin that says you have to give a worker at least 24 hours off during the course of a working week. That seems reasonable to me. Doesn't seem reasonable to Scott Walker. He wants that law out of the way. Why? Because he believes that if you don't regulate business, business will create jobs. But in fact, the less you regulate business, the closer you go to the precipice of total economic collapse. That's the lesson of the last 140 years of American history.
Speaking about economical collapse, what's your take on Greece's third bailout?
Well, it's very dangerous. We've talked in the past about the fact that the Great Depression of 1929 to 1939 did not really begin in October of 1929 when the stock market crashed. It really began in 1931 to 1932, and it began because of a domino effect among banks. There was a small bank no one had ever heard of in a country that didn't seem to matter, Austria. It was called Kreditanstalt, and it got into trouble. The Austrian government jumped in to bail out the bank, and they did it by merging it with a larger bank, thinking the larger bank was strong enough to stand the pressure. Well, the larger bank collapsed. Then the Austrian government jumped in to save the larger bank, and its government collapsed. Not only did the government collapse, the Australian monetary system collapsed. The Pfennig absolutely collapsed in value. So the Germans jumped in to help the Austrians, and the Germans collapsed. The French rushed in to help the Germans, and the French collapsed. The Americans rushed in to help the French, the Germans, and the Austrians, and 11,000 American banks went under. The American economy collapsed. Finally, Britain got involved. It had tried to stay out of it, and it collapsed. And this is how worldwide credit collapses have worked ever since roughly 1620. So this is a very dangerous situation. We know that the Chinese stock market lost $3.5 trillion in value in a single month. So things are precarious in China. And if the Greek banks collapse, if the Greek economy collapses, that could easily have a ripple effect. Could easily do the domino thing that was done by the Kreditanstalt Bank. So this is a dangerous moment. And Greece has a lot more to do with your future in mind, because we forget something, Rob. We forget that in what we used to call a panic, in other words, in an economic crash, in the past, up until 1930, and the changes brought in by the Roosevelt administration, when all the banks collapsed, they closed their doors. You couldn't get your hands on your money. That meant you literally could not pay for this week's groceries. You literally could not pay your rent. And we become accustomed to the fact that the FDIC keeps the banks alive no matter how bad the financial situation is. and you could still use your credit card during the great crash of 2008. You could still use your ATM machine. But that could end in a really, really big credit collapse. So this is a dangerous moment, and we have to watch every step.
What would happen if Greece Parliament votes not to go with the third bailout? Greece pulls out of the European Union. They have to go back to their own currency, and they kiss the debt of nearly $400 billion goodbye. What would happen to Greece, especially since it'll be totally bankrupt, I would imagine?
Right. The drachma, which they would reissue, would be useless. You'd see the kind of explosion of inflation that you saw in Germany in the 1920s when people were carrying wheelbarrows full of banknotes down to the local store to buy a loaf of bread. That's a guess, but I don't think that, there are a lot of people who believe, almost worship local currencies. And I'm sure some of those experts would try to jump in to make a local currency work, and perhaps they could do it. But the problem with Greece seems to be that it doesn't have enough productive engines. It doesn't have enough things that produce genuine jobs. It does well with its tourist industry, but it has difficulties with its other industries. The big real problem is, what would the impact be internationally? Would we have a global credit collapse? And it is entirely possible that we would.
Speaking about Greece's tourist industry, if they do go for this package, among the many, many hard-hitting taxes would be a 23% on basically everything that tourism is around, food and beverage.
Well, the VAT, the value-added tax, is one of the most hideous instruments of taxation I've ever seen in my life. It started to become popular in the Eurozone in the 1990s. It literally means that there's a sales tax that accumulates. In other words, if you're going to buy a loaf of bread, first the flour is taxed, and the yeast is taxed, and the baker is taxed, and the packaging company is taxed. And by the time it gets to you, there's an alleged, let's say, 10% VAT, value-added tax. But no, it's more like 30%.
Wow.
Because it's taxed at 10% every step of its manufacture. And raising a VAT tax to 27% that then is taxed over and over again on every step of the manufacture of an item is going to make things available only to the super rich in Greece. The poor are not going to be able to afford anything. The medium, in fact, and now the middle class is becoming poor in Greece.
Such a beautiful country as well. Close to Greece, we have, closer to Greece than to you and I here in North America, we have the ongoing Iran nuclear talks. Are we in
those? Oh my God, what a disaster.
I know.
The latest announcement, as of approximately an hour ago, is that we're close to a deal. We'll have a deal announced by the time you and I wake up tomorrow morning. That deal will include the ability to inspect absolutely any site we want in Iran. Sounds good, right?
Yeah, but I don't think the Iranians are going to go for that.
Well, they're going for it for a very simple reason, or apparently they're going for it, because it says that before we can inspect that site, we have to sit down and consult with the Iranians. Now, if you have something to hide, Rob, and you get a lot of notice, and people have to consult with you in order to get in to inspect you, what do you do during the time that you're finagling and haggling?
You shuffle whatever they want to see in point A and you put it in point B where they don't have the authority to go.
And you can imagine what John Kerry and his team are basically saying to the Iranians. Let us get this language that says that we have unlimited rights of inspection into our deal so we can show our people that we are actually delivering some limitations on your nuclear capacity. We'll put in the language that says we can only go to a site if we consult with you in advance. So in essence, what we're saying here is negated by the language that follows it. But we need this to fool our own people into going along with this deal.
Why is this deal so important if they have to basically lie? And will Congress or the Senate pass it, approve it? Doesn't the Senate or Congress have to approve it before it goes into law with a 2/3 vote?
Yeah, that was the deal that Obama made with Congress and the Senate. If the deal doesn't come in, if it comes in under a certain deadline,
right,
the Congress gets 30 days to consider it. If it comes in after that deadline, Congress gets 60 days to consider it. But the fact is that for some reason, Obama, who is an intelligent man, he's a very intelligent man, seems obsessed with this deal. He seems obsessed with its ability to make his mark on history. Now, of course, he could easily be making his mark on history the way Neville Chamberlain made his mark on history. The world will never forget Neville Chamberlain, but it will never love him, and it will always spit on his image because he brought us World War II. And Obama is playing a very dangerous game because Iran has proxy armies in 5 countries, is trying to take over the entire Islamic world. The Saudis are very aware of that. They've been trying to take over the Islamic world for a long time. And if we open the floodgates to Iranian export of oil, Iran is going to increase its budget enormously, absolutely enormously. Meanwhile, the Iranians are very clever at manipulating our stupidity in negotiations. We don't seem to have any negotiating ability. So they raised the issue of lifting the sanctions on their buying weapons from China and Russia and selling weapons elsewhere in the Middle East. And the reason they raised that was very obvious. They wanted to have something, a hammer, to hit John Kerry with, so that John Kerry would say, okay, in exchange for you taking the hammer away, I will give you another giant concession. They distracted attention from the real nuclear issues with that issue. Now, in fact, Iran is a weapons-producing country. Mm-hmm. It's already exported over 40,000 rockets to just one of its proxy armies, Hezbollah, in Lebanon. It's been trying to export weapons to Hamas, another of its proxy armies. Right now, as we speak, the Iraqi army is attacking Fallujah in an attempt to get Anbar back. Anbar is a Sunni province and is not at all comfortable being ruled by ISIS, which is right now ruling it. But at spearheading that attack are Iranian proxy armies, are Shiite military forces that take their orders from Iran. Iran is on a path of grand expansion, not just in the Middle East, but it's also been working on Afghanistan for a long, long time. And it's talked about East Turkmenistan, a part of China. So we are about to funnel all the money Iran needs to carry out its plans of international aggression. There is a reason that people like Benjamin Netanyahu and even Barack Obama have said that Iran is one of the major sources of terrorism in the world today because it supports all these proxy armies. The whole problem in Yemen right now, it comes from the fact that a proxy army for Iran, the Houthis, took over the whole country. And the Saudis, with that country right on its rear, are not happy about that and have been bombing. Unfortunately, the people who are suffering in this are the Yemeni population who are driven into refugee status. And when you talk about Greece is the greatest recipient of refugees. In the first 6 months of this year, it took in approximately 50,000 refugees. That's enough to populate an entire small town. That means in a year, you have enough refugees coming in to populate a small city. Most of these refugees are refugees from the crises in the Middle East that are caused by the battle between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And we're about to give Iran a huge edge in those battles, and we're about to give them the money it takes to expand those battles beyond just the Middle East.
So basically, we're going to be supporting Iran in any of their conquests.
Yeah, we're going to be supporting Iran. Now, look, once upon a time, it was approximately 2 to 3 years ago, I realized that we had made a huge mistake in supporting the Arab Spring because we thought that democracy was about to set forth,
right.
And it didn't. What we learned from that is toppling people like Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi. We were toppling people who were leading modernist, relative pluralist, relatively secular states in favor of crazies like the Islamic State, who took over in the vacuum. So the lesson we learned was it's important to support certain dictators when they're the best thing that you've got, when they're far better than the alternative state. And I called a friend who advises the White House and said, look, we have to realize that our real enemy in the Middle East is not Bashar Assad in Syria. In fact, he's a good guy, relatively speaking. A real enemy is ISIS. And our real natural ally against ISIS is Iran. So we somehow have to find a way to work with Iran. And my friend at the White House said, we're beginning to think that way. Well, we've thought that way so far that now we're ready to embrace Iran as a buddy and think that that will produce peace. It would, Rob, take my word for it. It will not produce peace.
Is there a greater risk now of nuclear war in the Middle East if this deal goes through?
There's a greater risk of war in the Middle East because Saudi Arabia will feel that it has to get its hands on nuclear weapons to counter Iran. Our inspection regime, I don't think, is going to stop any kind of nuclear activity in Iran whatsoever. And the Iranians are interpreting this deal as a deal that achieves the two following goals. One, it lifts sanctions. Two, it legitimates the Iranian nuclear program in the eyes of the world. It says that the entire world, including the United States, recognizes Iran's right to have a nuclear program and to have total sovereignty over it, do anything that they want with it. Meantime, the Russians are pushing Europe in the Ukraine, and they're adding new nuclear weapons to their arsenals. And let me read you a few things that I gathered for you, if I can find them, today from Pravda. This is how the Russians are being told to view their world, in a paranoid way, in a way that can lead easily to war. Here are some of the headlines from today's Pravda. Western Ukrainian fascists are about to break into Poland. Hey, you would want to stop that. The expansion of Western Ukrainian fascists into Poland. New York restaurants to sell dog meat. Why is that important? Because they're trying to demonize the United States. Brace yourself for this one.
Okay.
Pedophilia declared a sexual orientation in the U.S. Is this a hysterically and paranoid view of the United States? But it goes on. Exceptional Americans no longer believe in the future. And there are many questions to ask the United States. It says USA wants to settle scores with Iran rather than its nuclear program. And it says the real people you have to ask questions of are not the Iranians, it's the United States. Who was helping Pakistan to build nuclear weapons? Why is the USA modernizing its nuclear arsenals? Well, we're modernizing our nuclear arsenals because the Russians are adding new nuclear weapons and new nuclear missiles to their arsenals, but they're making it look as if we're the ones who are about to bring the world to the brink of a nuclear war. So we are closer than I'd like to think to the brink of a nuclear war. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the world will refrain. But once there are nuclear weapons in the hands of all of those Middle Eastern states that feel that they need nuclear weapons to protect themselves from Iran, those countries are highly unstable. They could fall into the hands of a group like ISIS at any moment and will be in real trouble.
Those stories, headlines that you were reading sounded as if they were coming out of the World Weekly News instead of the Pravda.
Well, Pravda once upon a time was Russia's major paper. Now It is the voice of Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin wants his people to be on edge and believe that they're at war with the United States at all times. I've told you in the past about a headline 2 years ago in Pravda that said that the reason the United States wanted to topple Bashar Assad was so that we could mass forces in the Middle East and march them straight to Moscow and topple the government of Russia. Well, that was crazy. That was insane.
Yeah.
But we talked before about the value to a demagogue of being able to point to an enemy and get people all aroused and frightened about that enemy. That's what Vladimir Putin has been doing with the image of the United States. It was a year ago, I was on my way back from Japan to the United States. I was talking about harvesting solar power in space, transmitting it down to Earth to people from the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, JAXA, and one representative from China. And my route on the way back took me through the airport in Dubai, a country where I have big fans, including the Sultan who runs Dubai. And in the airport, we only had a 3-hour layover. There was no time to get into the city. I ran into this very, very attractive Russian couple who were on their way back from a vacation. And this Russian couple was scared to death that I, as an American, was about to bring them to the brink of nuclear war.
Wow.
That only the Russians could stop us from making war because we were on the verge of doing it at any second. We were rabid. And instead of fangs, we had nuclear devices. And this was an educated, intelligent two people, just like you and me, except more attractive than the two of us.
Well, I don't know about that, bull friend. It just goes to show you that Putin's propaganda machine works.
Oh, it works. He's been driving most of the alternative press out of existence. He's been doing that for years. He's now got a list of foreign-supported organizations, and he's hounding them out of existence, and many of them are Russian-based organizations, but they don't agree with it. So they're being hounded out of existence. One just closed in the last week.
Exonation, Howard Bloom is my special guest this hour, www.howardbloom.net, and Howard is the author of the Mohammed Code that's available at Amazon.com. Howard and I will be back after this short break. Don't go away. You're listening to The X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. Florida drug dealer made a serious mistake when he dared peddle his poisons on the schoolyard of Robert W. Morgan's preteen daughter. Morgan, a budding film director, tracked him to his hidden Everglades lair where his meth lab mysteriously blew sky high. When Morgan's demands to police to make grammar school playgrounds safer from drugs were ignored, he sought the counsel of CIA operative Frank Sturgis. Again, he was warned to give up what was becoming an obsession. Instead, Robert used his reputation as a filmmaker to infiltrate the mafia by stroking their egos and offering to make films for them offshore so they could import them as foreign product without paying taxes. When they agreed to build him a studio in Panama, Robert called the DEA and FBI and offered to work undercover. In time, their combined efforts revealed how the mob was secretly laundering billions of dollars through the Vatican Bank in Rome before returning to the States as foreign investments. Now read Morgan's story, Citizen Spy, Vatican Cover-Up, The Mob, Money Laundering, and Murder, available at Amazon.com, BN.com, and Borders.com. If you enjoy reading a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love From Out of the Woodwork by William S. Peckham. Sean Kennedy, a Toronto contractor, buys derelict houses, guts them, and turns them into multi-family dwellings. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, a century house in ruins, and starts the renovation, the house fights back. He is visited by ghosts of owners past. His visions are triggered by touching an oak mantle, reading a faded letter, opening an old locket, or opening a brand new casket in the basement. These visions will take you on a trip across southern Ontario from Niagara Falls to Toronto to Kingston. From Out of the Woodwork is now available in paperback and on your favorite electronic reader. To order your copy of From Out of the Woodwork, go to www.williamspeckham.com. That's www.williamspeckham.com. Manifestation is driven by imagination, intent, and passion. In our culture, all three have been distorted and disabled by modern media and exploitation. Re-engage your imagination and your passion by entering into the world of paranormal romance. Kahir O'Donnell takes her readers on an exciting journey into the endless possibilities of loving, passionate, and mutually respectful male-female relationship. Her latest book, The Long Dark Night, features special ops adventure, a daring rescue, a psychic woman from the stars, and a special agent that will die to protect her. The Long Dark Night by Kahira O'Donnell is now available at KahiraO'Donnell.com or Amazon.com.
My name is Michael Telstar, Canada's leading mentalist from Toronto, Ontario.
Hi, my name is Splenda, and you're listening to my dad, Rob McConnell, on the X Zone.
This is Psychic Dorothy from St. Catharines, and you're listening to Rob McConnell.
Hello, my name is Holly Reeves, an astrologer from Astro For You, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to The X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. If you'd like to send an email, X-Zone at XZoneRadioTV.com on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and you can listen to the X-Zone 724 365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Howard Bloom. He is the author of what I call the Rosetta Stone of what is going on in the world today in the Middle East. It's entitled The Muhammad Code, and it's available at Amazon.com. Howard, since you and I last talked, there was the shooting in, where was it, Charleston, South Carolina, and they took down the Confederate flag from in front of the Capitals. Tell me, Howard, what is your opinion as to taking the Confederate flag out of public view in front of the public, what is it, the Capitol? Yeah.
The Capitol, right. At first I thought it was an act of intolerance because the Confederate flag represents the heritage of a whole lot of people. And then I read in the works of a really fine historian that, in fact, the Confederate flag didn't have much meaning in the South until it was used in the 1960s by what this historian, her name is Heather Cox Richardson, calls movement conservatives. And they used it in order to basically use hatred of blacks to impose the kind of political policy that Scott Walker wants to see, removing taxes from the super rich, removing regulations from the super rich, removing any protections for workers, rolling back the entire Franklin Delano Roosevelt program, rolling back the New Deal, getting rid of Medicare, Medicaid, etc. And so it's not an ancient symbol of a long heritage. Plus, even if it is, it's the symbol of a slave society, and it's not acceptable in the United States. Even though Jefferson was the one who wrote that all men are created equal with equal rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he had slaves. That was monstrous that he had slaves. The ideals he put forth were very valid, and I have black friends who are articulate, intelligent, computer engineers, computer scientists, who do wonderful, absolutely spectacular, incredible things. Remember, I helped, once upon a time, I did the publicity for the first all-black show on Broadway, The Wiz. Ken Harper, the guy who put it together, was an astonishing human being. Should he be treated like a slave? Should he be in fear of the Ku Klux Klan?
No.
Should one of my friends, who's a computer scientist, know that when he leaves my house, the Bloom Brownstone, and walks up the street on the way to the subway, that he can be stopped by the police and frisked and possibly even shot because he's black? So there's a whole different thought pattern that applies to him than applies to me. That's monstrous. And we can't continue to support that. And the most positive thing that happened after the Charleston shootings was that people like the mayor of Charleston came out and demonstrated that the kind of racism that used to apply in the South in the 1960s is gone from the hearts of many modern Southerners. Many modern Southerners regard their black compatriots with as much dignity as they regard their white co-citizens.
And why shouldn't
that's
they?
A remarkable change.
And why shouldn't they?
They should.
Yes.
And those, I mean, kids like Dylan Roof, the guy who did the shooting, with all of the photos that he took of himself with the Confederate flag, he definitely associated that flag with racism. He wanted blacks to continue to function as a subordinate race, like puppy dogs and slaves. And that's simply not acceptable in the modern era. So much as I don't like treading on anyone's heritage, we all need a heritage. It's very important in our lives. This is one symbol that really has to go.
I agree. You know, but what I really, really admired was the way those people, God bless them, in the church who survived, and those surviving members of those who were gunned down, forgave the shooter.
It was remarkable, Rob.
It was.
It would have happened. That would have happened 100 years ago or today, because the black community, church is extraordinarily important in the black community. forgiveness is extraordinarily important in certain forms of Christianity. And I say that certain forms of Christianity, it's important because Jesus believed in forgiveness. Mm-hmm. You would think that all Christians believe in forgiveness, but somehow there are some Christians who interpret the message of Christianity as that the rich shall rule and the rest shall do the best that they possibly can under the circumstances. That war is the ultimate end of a society and killing is glorious. How anyone interprets Christianity as having those messages when Jesus said it shall be harder for the rich man to get to the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through an eye of a needle. And when Jesus said turn the other cheek, it's hard for me to believe. But fortunately, the people in this particular church heard the message of forgiveness from Jesus, not the message of belligerence.
That's because there are a lot of people within every religious belief who are nothing else but a bunch of hypocrites.
That's absolutely true. But when you get a large group of hypocrites together, they can take over a church and they can turn their hypocrisy into the true form of the religion.
I agree with you, Howard, but it was so... I don't know if refreshing is the right word.
Heartening. It was really heartening.
That's
heartening to see what these victims, the families of the victims did in their forgiveness. It was even more heartening to see the mayor come out and treat blacks for the first time in my political life as total equals with absolutely the same rights as every other South Carolinian.
And that is an example that I believe in my heart of hearts, Howard, that is going to start changing the way that those who do not have the ability to see past a color are going to change their minds.
I hope they're going to change their minds. I think there's a societal change underway. It's long and slow. It's been 60 years since the 1960s, or 50 years, and it's taken a long time, but there's something slowly gestating here in what Steven Pinker wrote, The Better Angels of My Nature. Now, in my biased mind, I know Steven Pinker read my book, The Lucifer Principle, and there was a page in The Lucifer Principle about how the rate of peace has been increasing in the world dramatically and the rate of violence has been going down. And it was based on a set of statistics from anthropological studies. Steven Pinker turned that into an entire book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. And The Better Angels of Our Nature documents exactly what I was talking about in 600 brilliant pages of astonishing research. The rate of peace in the world has gone up by a factor of 10 since 1650. Your odds of dying a death at the hands of a fellow human being are 1/10 what they would have been in 1650, 1/10 what they would have been in a primitive tribe. So whether Steven Pinker is responsible for that idea or not doesn't matter. The point is, Steven Pinker tries to account for this. And he says it's because in the 1700s, the Western world underwent a humanitarian revolution. The novel was invented in approximately 1710. It allowed us to see into the minds of other human beings, to see through the eyes of other human beings, and to contain the personalities of other human beings within ourselves, to have empathy and compassion for our fellow human beings. That humanitarian revolution, which is totally Stephen's idea, not mine, that humanitarian revolution has been advancing for the last 250 years. And what we saw in the mayor of Charleston and his ability to see his black citizens as totally equal to himself was an advance in that humanitarian revolution that, to use the phrase we were using before, the word we were using before, is really powerfully heartening.
Two more things I'd like to discuss with you. We have about 13 minutes left, my producer just said, Howard. Number one, New York Stock Exchange, Wall Street Journal, United Airlines all went down last week because of computers. Nobody mentioned anything about hacking. However, Howard, I found it very, very suspicious that the day prior to the three computers networks going down, it was announced that the director of the FBI would be in Washington on the following day discussing encryption and other concerns the FBI has with computers. Noon the same day that the FBI director is scheduled to talk on Capitol Hill, you have the Wall Street Journal systems that go down. You have the New York Stock Exchange systems that go down. You have United Airlines systems that go down. I can't buy this being a coincidence, Howard.
It's entirely possible that this was hacking because we know that there's a vigorous hacking industry. We're hacking the Chinese computers like crazy, and the Chinese have been hacking us like madmen for a long time. Look at the loss of the records on 25 million people for the Human Resources Office of the United States government. That just happened in the last 2 weeks.
And it was just discovered. It was just discovered that over 1 million set of fingerprints were also taken during that hack.
Amazing. So we're living in a radically new environment when it comes to cyberspace. Mm-hmm. The good thing about cyberspace is that when people make war in cyberspace, yes, they can do a lot of harm. Yes, potentially they can shut down our entire electrical system. They can shut down possibly our water system. They can do a lot of damage. But it isn't war. It isn't the equivalent of dropping a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima.
Yeah, that's true.
So it goes along with that theme of the world getting more peaceful year by year by year. I mean, look at our latest wars. The number of people killed in 10 years in Iraq, the number of Americans killed in Iraq in 10 years is smaller than the number of people killed in 2 hours of battle in World War I.
So does this mean we're getting smarter when it comes to warfare?
I don't think we're getting smarter with this revolution, this evolution that we're going through. Mm-hmm. None of us have planned it. We don't even know. Most of us don't recognize it exists. No, there's nobody engineering it. It is happening on its own. We are very lucky that it's happening on its own. But our task as human beings is to aspire to omniscience. It's aspire to know everything. And as a consequence, we have to know things like the mystery of why this has been happening. Why? Because if over the last 350 years we can become 10 times more peaceful, it's our obligation over the next 100 years to make life 10 times or 15 times more peaceful. And we can only do that if we understand how it's done. We will do it apparently unconsciously, non-consciously, one way or the other. But it's so much better if we can jump in with both feet and understand what we're doing and accelerate the process.
Have you noticed that there hasn't been a lot in the news lately about ISIS?
Well, actually, the Fallujah thing is taking place. There is another city in Anbar that Iraq is the Iraqi army, which, as I said, is made to a large extent of Iranian-controlled Shiite forces, is attacking a second city. So there is action. And what I noticed that particularly puzzled me is that last week, for the first time, we started making airstrikes against Raqqa. Now, Raqqa is the capital of the Islamic State. That's their headquarters. That's their safe haven. There were no reports on the damage that I could find, no reports on the damage done. And once the first reports had appeared, the whole thing disappeared. But that's a dramatic change in the war, bringing the war straight to the center of ISIS. So you're right. There is a strange distortion going on in what we're reading.
It seems as if this is the calm before the storm.
It could be, but meantime, Boko Haram killed another 53 people today in Nigeria, and Boko Haram claims to be a waliya. A waliya means a province. So Boko Haram claims that it is a province of the Islamic State. And there are a number of these self-declared provinces of the Islamic State around, most dangerously in Afghanistan, where we apparently wiped out an ISIS leader. I certainly hope so. So to the extent that these waliyas spread, that there are large geographic areas whose Islamic jihadist forces declare allegiance to the Islamic State, the more that happens, the more trouble we're in. However, in Nigeria, the president just fired the 4 top heads of his military because he didn't feel that they were making sufficient progress against Boko Haram. He's a military man himself, and hopefully he has better people in mind, and hopefully this will lead to an improvement in Nigeria's ability to exterminate Boko Haram.
You know, you and I have talked many times about the immigration problem, and there are two cases that come to mind. Number one, you have the case of the person in San Francisco who had been deported 5 times already, has a rap sheet, gets back into the United States, claims to have found a gun under a park bench wrapped up in a cloth, and kills somebody in San Francisco. And then, once again, going to Mexico, you've got the Mexican government who lost one of the greatest drug cartel leaders. They still haven't found him.
They lost him to a multi-million-dollar project. This guy put together his own little Apollo project. A tunnel 1 mile long, Rob, 5 feet high, 2.5 feet wide, equipped with everything you need to get from one end of the tunnel to the other, including a motorcycle that had been jury-rigged as a kind of railroad track, a motorcycle on a track. Imagine how much that costs to build. Imagine the amount, the team, and the precision of the engineering you need to make this thing happen. This guy pulled off an astonishment, but it's a testament to the corruption of the Mexican system, where every policeman is up for bribe.
What do you think will happen with the immigration system? You read the stories, you hear the story about the young lady who was killed in San Francisco by this person who was deported, 5 times? And then there's over 200 sanctuary cities in the United States?
Well, I'm very confused about the immigration issue. Look at Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is the heartland of America's economic growth, and it is where America's economic future is coming from. Right now, 50% of the founders of the companies in Silicon Valley are immigrants to the United States. Look at America, where our space program is being destroyed by a bunch of very greedy senators who are trying to foist upon us a Franken-rocket that will never fly in order to provide jobs to their states. That's why we haven't had access on an American vehicle of any kind to space for American citizens since 2011. Who's coming to our rescue? Elon Musk. Where is Elon Musk born? South Africa. He's an American immigrant. My grandparents were immigrants. At some point, your great-great-great-great-grandparents were immigrants too.
That is so true.
This is an immigrant country.
Yeah.
So, and the statistics tend to reveal that immigrants are no more peaceful than the rest of us, but they're no more violent than the rest of us. Now, I've had a situation like the one you're talking about in San Francisco. My daughter, a long time ago, just after remember we let a huge number of Cuban immigrants into the country, and we discovered, or we thought, that Fidel Castro had used that immigration to empty his jails and get rid of all of his criminals.
Yep.
Well, my daughter was in a club in New York City listening to music, and a bunch of Cubans broke into the club, and they took hostages. And my daughter was taken hostage, I was afraid that I wouldn't see my daughter again, ever. She was being driven around New York State someplace in a van as a hostage. Well, I fortunately got her back. Now, you would think that would instill in me a tremendous fear and hostility toward immigrants. But again, every population has its criminal few.
Exactly.
And most of the immigrants I know are very hardworking people.
I agree, Howard, but when you have as many undocumented immigrants as you have in the United States, these people, I don't blame them for trying to get a better life, Howard. Please don't misunderstand me. But if you're going to be an immigrant, if you want to immigrate into a country, you should do it the right way.
It would be nice, and I don't know what the solution legally is, but I do know that on my street out here in Park Slope, Brooklyn, if I'm out late at night, and I often am, I will see Mexicans or Chinese who do not speak the English language yet going up the street, methodically collecting bottles and recyclable garbage, making their living that way. And I have met Mexicans who work their way from that to owning shops that have been absolutely gorgeous, stunning beyond belief. So there's an awful lot of talent there that's coming into the United States. The people who immigrate tend, at least historically, to self-select. The most ambitious, the most hardworking, those who aspire the highest, those are the ones who leave their homeland and come to another country. So we tend to benefit from these people. I look at my family. My grandparents were poor. They didn't have college educations. One of my cousins has founded the leading avant-garde theater company in Washington, D.C., and has won so many Helen Hayes Awards that he can't count them anymore, plus a Pulitzer. Another cousin of mine has started 2 schools in Harlem that have taken kids off the street, normal Harlem kids, and have turned them into super scholars, kids who get into college and finish college.
I agree. There are immigrants who come to both the United States and Canada who make a positive contribution to society. And yet you have those who bring with them the luggage of criminal histories that
well, if we had a more, I'm not an expert on this, but if we had a more open immigration system, it would allow us to let people in legally so we could screen those who have a criminal history and keep them out.
Yeah. Hey, Howard, my friend, as always, time goes by so fast when I'm talking to you. We covered a lot of great topics tonight. I can't thank you enough for joining me. It's always a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Rob, it's my pleasure.
And Howard, keep the way you are forever, my friend, because the world needs Howard Bloom.
Thanks, Rob. Have a great night.
You take care of yourself, and peace be with you, my good friend.
Thanks.
Exonation, the one and only Howard Bloom has been my guest this hour. www.howardbloom.net. Well, that's it for tonight here in the X-Zone. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock at 8 o'clock, at 8 o'clock, as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It is truly a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, and we're here Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. on as we continue broadcasting live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. So from everyone here in the X-Zone to everyone out there, always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. My name is Rob McConnell. Good night.